Hello, and welcome to the Moronomics podcast.
I'm Heather, the economist.
And I'm Joe, the moron. In this podcast, an accomplished and brilliant economist attempts to explain concepts from her field to her high school classmate, who is kind of a moron. Heather, instead of doing the how are you sort of thing, I was wondering for this week if economics were a dessert, what dessert would it be?
Oh man. That's a good one. Yeah.
You can
Hmm.
also just fill in your own favorite dessert if you'd like.
I know, I might. I just had a nice ice cream cake for my birthday. I still
Ooh,
do Caravelle ice cream cakes. It
happy
reminds me
birthday.
of nostalgia, but I don't know if that's descriptive of economics. I feel like
Okay.
economics is multi-layered. It's
No, I
probably
like
like
that. No, it
Sunday,
works.
it's like a Sunday. It looks really simple when you get it in the dish, just some ice cream with some cream on top and some toppings. But once you dig in,
Hmm.
there's a lot of flavor.
No, I think ice cream cake actually works. This isn't one of those where I have a correct answer in mind, but I do like ice cream cake because you got like a core of a thing, and then, yeah, like you say, there's layers, and yeah, it's very customizable. By the way, the comedian Patton Oswalt has an absolutely brilliant stand-up routine from maybe 20 years ago about Tom Carvel ice cream cakes, and it's a bit profane, so don't listen to it with the kids around, maybe. But it is absolutely Patton Oswalt, brilliant stand-up comedian. Anyway, okay. So our topic for this week, for this bye week, I guess, is housing. And
Oh,
the way I was
yes.
thinking about this is, yeah, well, yeah, Heather says this is one of her favorite topics. Um, so uh, when I think about housing, I'm very fortunate. I'm, well, I guess, fortunate slash tied to a mortgage, so I am a homeowner of sorts. Although the bank owns most of it. I think I own like maybe this corner of this room at this point. But uh, so I was thinking about though my parents, who are baby boomers, born in 49 and 51, and I was thinking, when they bought their first house in the late 70s, that was the era of sort of what we learned about in high school is stagflation, simultaneous high unemployment and high inflation. So to get that under control, interest rates were just jacked up really high. And so when they bought their house in the late 70s, I believe 78 or 79, they had an 8% interest rate. And that was considered to be pretty good for that time, but they were able to do this. They were, in their late 20s, early 30s, and it was doable. You could buy a house with that interest rate, and they weren't making big money. They were, they had college educations, but they were working in education, which at the time was not real high paid. Um, and so how were they able to do that? What changed that made? I mean, a lot of young people in like a young person. Well, I think the stat I saw is that the average age of buying a house now, or the median age, maybe whatever, is like 40 or 39 or something like that. What changed? How did housing get so expensive that it's suddenly out of reach?
I love this question. So my folks actually bought a home in 1982 with a 17% mortgage rate. So maybe your
What?
parents were, maybe they were either much better creditors, borrowers, I should
Wow.
say, or maybe they used a credit union. I don't know. I'd love to hear that, what their first banking experience was there. But so yeah, my dad said the bank actually reduced his rate by 2%, just sent him a note. It was like, you've been paying pretty well, so we'll make you a 15% loan now. I mean, it was
Wow.
about the wild days of banking. But anyway, yeah. Um, so yeah, why could our parents do this, whether it was 8 or 17% mortgage rate? And what you're basically illustrating is the mortgage rate matters a little bit, but what really matters is the home price. And I just
Okay.
looked it up again. The median home price today, so the typical home price in America is 400,000, give or take. And back in those days in 1980, let's cut the difference, it was like 50,000.
So is that
So
adjusted dollars or is that
no, it's not adjusted
okay?
for inflation entirely, but
Okay.
you can see that the home prices are,
Yeah.
they've gone up 55% since the pandemic. So
Oh,
for
wow.
people and which is great if, Joe owns that little slice of that room, even though
Yeah.
you only own a small slice of it, that slice is worth so much more money now. But obviously anyone trying to get on on that housing ladder, it just feels so out of reach. And, a good example, look, the mortgage rates went down a little bit in 2025, right? And
Yeah.
briefly in early 2026, they dipped below 6%. Woo, back into the
Yeah.
fives. Our phone was ringing off the hook at Navy Federal Credit Union, people wanting to refinance, people wanting to lock in a rate. But the difference is really only, it was like a couple $100 compared to the year before,
Yeah.
because
I've
the
actually,
prices of the homes are still high.
I want to just back up real quick for those that are not. So I have some background in stats and stuff like that. But for those that aren't like stats people, median is different from average or what stats is called the mean. Median means if we took all the homes and that exist in the supply and lined them up in ascending order of value, the median is the one that sits in the middle of those. So it's not we're adding them all up and dividing by the number of homes. I'm just for our listeners that might not be as stats minded. That's what median means. It's if you ranked them all in order of value and found the one in the middle, that's the number that Heather's talking about. I imagine the actual average house price is a good bit higher because it's dragged upward by like the reason we use the median is because the average house, we add them all together, divide by the number. It's dragged upward by houses that are 50 million or whatever that are in
Yeah, by Jeff Bezos
Jackson Hole,
house,
Wyoming
Mark
or wherever.
Zuckerberg house, all those
Exactly. Yes.
ones.
Okay. Anyway, sorry to brief tangent there, but yes. So houses have gotten more expensive, and it's not the interest rate; it's the housing price. Okay,
It's
sorry,
a
I'm
little the
trying to get
interest
back to where you
rate,
were.
but the big factor is the housing price.
Right,
So I don't want to say that the mortgage rate matters nothing. It matters a little bit, but again, it's only going to make a couple $100 difference. You have to
right,
go down. If somebody ran the calculation, you have to go down to like 2% or even lower mortgage rate to be in a world where things could be even remotely equivalent to a couple years ago in affordability. So,
right.
mm, so that kind of
So
helps illustrate.
what
eh,
happened in 2020 that made houses? It obviously a lot of things happened in 2020, but houses suddenly just you said 55% increase in value or in
yeah.
price.
Mhm.
Value is a more abstract term. We'll stick with price. So what was it that happened in the economy?
Yeah, I mean, two big things. A lot of people remember the days of everyone trying to move out of cities and into these big backyard homes, and so they were looking for single family homes and a big rush into
Hmm.
the suburbs. But the other thing, almost the more important factor is millennials. Millennial generation. Now we're the older millennials, right? So we were on
Right,
the leading edge of this, but in around 2020, millennials hit their early 30s. And that's the time in America that modern generations tend to settle down, whatever that means, whether it's
right,
partnering up or whether it's having a kid or whether it's just saying, hey, I've hit an age where I want to buy the house myself. And so you have this literal population spike of the prime home buying years, and it was occurring alongside this pandemic. You also had the really low mortgage rates that happened during when the Federal Reserve cut those interest rates to like zero again. And so all those factors came together at once. And it was a stampede. I tell the story. I remember I was living in the DC area and I went to look at a townhouse it was just under $500,000 in the DC suburbs. I was one of 100 people there in
wow,
late 2021 to look at this townhouse. I mean, it felt
wow.
like the set of Squid Game. And that was just in an open house for a townhouse, but it sort of shows you just the demand. And I think,
Yeah,
Joe, what you're really asking me is why in America has supply and demand for housing seem to have fundamentally broken? That's if
yeah.
you learn any
That's
economics, it's like supply and demand meet, and that's where the price is. And if there's a lot more demand for the ice creams, the ice cream seller is going to go out and make more ice cream or, or tell his buddies to come so you can meet the demand and raise
yeah,
the price. And it's really not happening in the American housing market.
yeah. Well, and that's I guess that is the core of it, right? You would think with increased demand, uh, sorry, I'm thinking two things at the same time here. One is with more adaptive technologies and things like that, people who might have otherwise aged out into smaller home or an apartment or like I'm thinking of our like our parents' generation, they might have otherwise aged out into a smaller home like a townhome or retirement community or something like that. Their homes are able to be adapted to make them livable for longer, which hey, that's great. I'm very glad that that's a possible thing. So that has to do something to the supply. But if that supply is not happening, why aren't people building these houses? I mean, there's
Amen.
clearly demand for them. Is
Amen.
it
This is the
is there a factor
question.
that's like
Yes.
is it I don't know if you've ever seen the meme, the fix everything easily switch. Have you ever seen that? I
Yeah.
I love that meme. It's like you're a switch pressing obsessed maniac. You can't just press the switch? And it's like, well, is there a switch for this that we press that makes? I mean, obviously there probably isn't, but what are the buttons that we can push on this?
Well, there's a lot of things wrong, but let me point to like three key factors that have broken down. And there are some efforts to try to fix this. Other parts of the world, some parts of the country are doing a better job than others, but there's sort of like three fundamental things that went berserk in the last 15 years, or really, 15 to 25 years, depending upon where you start the clock. Number one, a lot of people have heard a lot about, and that's zoning. It's amazing how many communities in the United States still say you can only build one home per acre. In other words, which is basically saying nobody can build anything less than $1 million home in this area. It's like
Okay.
not just keep the riffraff out, it's keep the middle class out. And
Oh,
so
okay.
there's a lot of zoning laws on the books that prevent the building of high density is the formal term. You know a lot of this better from your community involved local government days, but you can't build townhomes, you can't build small condos, you can't build anything that's not one massive McMansion with a big yard. And
Hmm.
that is obviously not where the demand is. That is not the 100 people like who are with me trying to look for a townhome.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so zoning is the first one that's gotten more attention lately from both Republicans and Democrats, thank God. Number two is a breakdown in financing. So this is my world. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is after the Great Recession in the 08, 09, 2010 era, um, the number of builders go bankrupt, right? We have a housing
Yeah.
crisis. Suddenly we've got a glut of homes in places like Arizona and Florida. So we don't need to build homes for a couple of years. And so literally half of the builders in this country are wiped out overnight
Oh,
in that
wow.
period. And so we physically didn't have people and companies, particularly the smaller companies, your mom and pop family owned, we build, 12 to 50 homes a year type of people are gone from the market. And they really don't come back. And the reason they don't come back isn't because there's the demand is there. We need these people. But the banks don't want to take the risk.
Right.
Right. And so bankers are
They'd
not.
rather bank, or sorry,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're going there, right? So now we just have more and more large companies that
that's what I
are
was about to say.
building.
That's the safer bet, right? Well, not
Yep.
bet, but I mean,
Yep.
it is. It's in a manner like an investment is a sort of a bet. And so the safer investment for, say, I don't know, what's one of the big banks that does like financing for how, like, is that something that Goldman
Yep.
Sachs? Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
not
So,
probably not them, but
uh,
Chase, Bank of
okay,
America,
sure.
a lot of
So
these folks.
if they're going to invest in a building project, like say yeah, a townhouse community, they don't want to go with some local, no pun intended, Joe Schmo type that says, "Well, I'm starting up a contracting business,
Ding, ding,
or I've
ding.
I've
Yep.
I've got a small contracting business. We've been building houses in the area. We'd like to build a development of houses." Bank of America is going to look at that and say, absolutely not. You don't have an HR department. You don't have a
Ding,
finance
ding.
department.
Yep.
You just have a business manager that kind of does those things right now. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yep,
So
and
so
so
the
what
financing,
you do so what you can do is you have to have somebody who wants to purchase the home give more money up front. And who is
mm,
able to do that? Is the people who want the McMansions, right?
right.
They can pay a third, Yeah, I just had a friend of a friend who was like, "Oh yeah, I had to put down a third of a $2 million home." I mean, there's not a lot of people in America who can do that, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it takes to get that builder to go under
Wow.
contract. And so
Yeah.
you can see the financing part of it has also, we got the zoning that protects from building smaller homes. We got the financing that's gearing towards the bigger homes. And then the last one, you can hear my passion for this, as a middle class person. my the high rise, every other part of the world, you show up in these Asia, Europe, parts of Africa, and it's all these high rises, right? That's how they
Okay.
solve their crises of housing. And we build almost no high rises in America anymore. And the
Hmm.
reason is really our legal system. So uh, there's been, unfortunately, in the United States, there were some very high profile buildings. You may remember the one in Florida that collapsed over the
Yes.
years. Obviously, those are huge tragedies. And what changed in the industry is the builders of those high rises can be sued for decades to come. And
Oh.
so no builder, no bank, no financer, no insurer, nobody wants to take that risk of
Is
having
this
40 or
that
50
topic?
years later that you could be sued for a tragedy. I mean, you want
Yeah.
somebody to build a
Right.
good building, but now nobody builds the building, right? Again,
Right.
everything is geared towards the fastest home you can put up in America is a large single family home.
So is this what's that tort reform?
Yeah,
Is that this would
yeah.
be okay, this is tied, 'cause I hear about tort reform on a lot of things, like, you know, they talk about it for medical stuff, and we need to do an episode on medical something
Yeah,
insurance. I don't know.
that's, woo.
We need to do something on that one of these days. Uh, uh, but tort reform on that, on things like auto stuff, I think, like cars and stuff like
Mhm.
that, tort reform. But I saw an interesting take on
And it's
this.
tricky because you don't want people to get hurt. Like, everyone agrees that if the building falls down, someone is responsible, but,
Well, sometimes, sometimes it's
we're
just rotten luck.
yeah, but we're in a world where, the result of our laws that are across many parts of the country is that pretty much no one's building high rises. And so,
Yeah.
I had written a piece, kind of a provocative piece when I was at the Washington Post at the end of my Post era that said the American dream should be a townhome. And it even got on
Mm.
Fox News, like they were talking about it and splashing around.
I
But
think I saw something about this
yeah,
even in my limited awareness
yeah.
of social media. Yeah.
But what we were really trying to do is say that it doesn't have to be a townhome, but we were trying to say we need to reform the zoning laws, we need to reform the financing side of things to build more small starter homes. And those could be townhomes, or Houston has a model where they build their homes on tiny lots. Like, you can literally
Yeah.
stretch out your arms and hit your neighbor, but you've got like 1 foot of grass between you, So it doesn't matter, whether it's that, or some places are building, duplexes or whatever, the quadplex, or sort of
Hmm.
four homes, a home that's broken up. Like, you could do it in different ways. We're not dictating, but you have to change people's mentalities to change the local government officials' mentality, change the builders' mentality, change the financing community mentality to how can we build more of these. And we used to do it. I mean, look, you go to beautiful Baltimore or beautiful Philadelphia or DC or Boston. Hello,
I
it
might
was
choose other
row,
examples for beautiful, but okay, yes.
but it was row homes, right? Row homes
Right.
were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when we had a similar housing crunch, and they were trying to do something, to help
Hmm.
alleviate the housing crisis for the middle class, and they built, surprise, row homes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a sort of a proven strategy. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick break here and just do socials and plugs. So I'll go through the socials real fast. We're on X as Moronomics. We're on Bluesky. I know it's Blue Sky, but I like to say Bluesky. As at Moronomics. YouTube, same thing. You can email us moronomicspod@gmail.com. We do have a Facebook page now. I haven't figured out how to change the URL on that. So sorry. I'll try and figure that out soon. In terms of plugs, Heather, do you have anything you'd like to plug? Anything yeah, that's going on with you?
Sure. I mean, I just had a birthday, and as you can I cut some bangs, which are cheaper than Botox, highly recommend for it's been fun, and but the other one with, I think, hitting kinda middle age squarely here is, I also gave a speech recently talking about, about the realities of being a woman in corporate America, some of my triumphs and also some of the struggles. And it was really refreshing, and I got super huge positive feedback. So I encourage more people to have those, share your life story moments when you have the chance. And the really quick one I'll share is, most people, if they know me, friends, family, coworkers, whatever, they'll be like, "Oh, you go on TV a lot and talk about the economy. I've seen you on TV, or my grandma's seen you on TV." You know, but what the story that I shared that a lot of people don't know is, like, 12 years ago, I was working at CNN in New York. I was heading a lot of the markets and economy coverage, and one of the anchors wanted to have me come on his show to talk about, why the funny enough, it was why the oil price was rising. Feels like deja vu. And, the head of my division said no. And, like, as someone who's a Hermione Granger type, I thought, "Okay, I just need to outwork this problem." So I had, if you watch Devil Wears Prada, I had, like, the makeup room gave me a makeover, and, to try to give me a better look, and I went home and watched all these videos and footage of CNN interviews to try to, practice in front of the mirror. And so I came back and said, "Okay, I think I'm ready. Maybe not for prime time, Anderson Cooper,
Right.
but, can I go on the weekend or 2 a.m. in the morning?" And the guy basically said, "I decide who goes on TV, and you will not go on TV." And it
Ooh.
was the first time in my life that I just slammed into an immovable wall, and it wasn't really about me per se, it wasn't fair, I couldn't outwork the problem. And the way that I got on TV for the very first time is an anchor named Richard Quest from Quest Means Business. It's a CNN international show. He's still there. And he
Hmm.
probably won't remember this, but man, it was a big moment in my life. He literally walked down the stairs from the fifth floor to the fourth floor where I sat with my team and this man who was blocking me set from going on TV set. And he walked into this guy's office and he said, "I want to be clear. This is my show, and I put who I want on my show, and Heather Long is going to go on my show today." And it was
Wow.
really this powerful moment. He kept the door open on purpose so people could hear this, I think. And, obviously it was the first time that I ever went on TV, and I was nervous and whatever, but you need your first date. Like, you need
Mhm.
your
Yeah. Right.
first rodeo. And, but it really opened my eyes to the power of champions in the
Mm.
workplace or in life in general. Like, people are really good about trying to get mentors these days and trying to study up and read books and listen to podcasts. But that anchor was not my mentor. He was not my buddy, but he did something that was a game changer in my career by advocating for me. And, I try to do it for other people now, but I think, that message, sharing that message really resonated, with a lot of people, because I think the first time that you really hit those barriers in life, and you realize it is not a meritocracy is very hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank
Yeah.
you for my little show there.
No, that's great. And I think there are the big ways we can do that when we're in positions of power, as Mr. Quest was. But I think about even just the little ways that we can try to reinforce or reward deserving people who have put in the work, who we do believe in. And I think about, I'm still, at sort of entry level in my new career of human resources. But when we have meetings and things, I try to, if someone says something that I think is a good idea, and I can see it kind of getting some traction, but this person's been kind of edged out of it. I'll say, yeah, I really like so and so's idea that we're talking about now, and I'll try to, and that's a way even from the bottom to reinforce, people that are trying to, make a break for things. Yeah, but yeah, the role of being a champion. That's such a good word for it too, because it's the putting yourself out in front on behalf of someone who you believe in. Yeah, yeah, man, that's a. I mean, I'm sure. boy, there are whole podcasts about media and the
Yeah.
power dynamics that happen behind the scenes and stuff like.
Yes.
Although I don't know,
Yes.
probably not about the behind the scenes stuff because that's a way to find yourself out of the media. But that is why my only plug for this week, by the way, is try something like I'm going to be an election judge for our upcoming
Oh,
primary
neat.
here in Maryland. Give that a try. I haven't done it before,
Is
but they
that a
found out that
volunteer? Like, do you just raise your hand? How do you become that?
well, there's so I did it because we got an email from our county executive at I work for the county and it was like yeah. Try. I don't know if it was actually directly from her now that I think about it, but I got an email that said, "Hey, do you want to be an election judge? You get a day. It's like leave from work, so you don't have to take a paid
That's
time
good
off
insight.
for it." And it's a day of work. But then they found out, oh, you work for the county. We might make you a chief judge. I'm like, wait a second. I haven't done this before, so maybe don't put me in charge. But anyway, but yeah, something like being an election judge, volunteer, be part of the process, because it's one thing to we've all got frustrations with processes and systems, but yeah, get involved. That's my plug for this week. So anyway, so circling back to housing, let's see. So where? Oh God, I should have taken a note of where we were. These three things, right? The zoning, the financing, and the high rises, or the sort of the legal system that prevents us from doing big things. You know, uh, uh, so I was thinking about this. So one way is to think about this as yeah, making high density housing or higher density, maybe not
Yeah,
high density.
right.
I think we're also going to bump into like a cultural thing here with Americans. I have a friend that lives in the Shenandoah Valley
Mm.
of Western Virginia, and he describes himself as he's kind of a good old boy, but he says, I like to have a lot of space around me. It's maybe that's my German side or Scots Irish, or it's just a thing. I don't do well with authority. I'm very religious, but I like to have a lot of space around. And so I think about that too because I'm half German ancestry, and I'm the same way. I mean, my house is I'm not in a out in the country house, but I live near other people, and my neighbors are fine. I don't have problems with my neighbors or anything, but I would like to have a lot more space around me. And I don't know that that's something we can necessarily write out of American culture. Uh, so if we think about the high rises and reforming the legal system, I mean, hey, that would be great. I think there's a lot of things people would like to reform about the legal system, but are there people thinking about solutions that don't kind of the problem of if everybody would just or if we could just within the sort of the legal, financial, and I guess regulatory environment that we're in? Are there perspectives on this that don't require major changes to these things? Or is there a sort of outside the box kind of thing that anybody's working on
Yeah, I mean,
that you
look,
know
that's
of?
what
Yeah.
I think local government is really good at this, in the sense of you have to have a solution that works for your community. And so, the solution that Northern Virginia needs or New York City needs or the LA or San Francisco or even Houston and Dallas and most of Florida needs is going to be different than the solution that, the Shenandoah Valley needs.
Hmm.
The reality is that more Americans now have moved to large metro areas. And I'm a
Hmm.
good example. I don't live in the city of DC anymore, but I live in the DC suburbs, right? And so that's where the real demand is. When you see these statistics that talk about that we need 2 to 3 million more houses, we're literally at a shortage. Most of those people do not want to live in the Shenandoah Valley, or it's not
Right.
realistic
Yeah.
because their job isn't there.
Right.
Uh,
There's no job there. I know a
yeah,
lot of people that would love to live in a place
yeah,
like
it's
because it's
gorgeous.
beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places
Yeah,
in the country, other than where we grew up. But yeah, it's not realistic. It's yeah. To be clear, not to our audience, nobody's bagging on the Shenandoah Valley. It's that the economy there does not have the jobs that people
exactly.
can
You're
go
saying
to.
it
Yeah.
better. I will say what you do see in a lot of those communities like Shenandoah Valley or beach communities is discussions around restrictions on the Airbnbs. because
Ah,
what housing is there is sometimes being bought up by investors who are turning around and renting it out, and then, your buddy or his the friend's family can't live there, right? And
right,
so how do you make those dynamics of we want those tourism dollars to come, but we
right.
also don't don't want to have 15 empty houses here where people are only coming in certain times of the year. And so that's where I think a lot more rural America is having those types of discussions. Or
Interesting.
it's famously, you've got a lot of parts of Montana where all these billionaires have moved in, same problem. Like, okay, it's great that they've built these huge homes and, taken these huge ranches, but where's the culture? Because they never live there and they never
Yeah,
participate in the local community. And so again, how do you strike those balances, I think, is more the rural America challenge versus the suburban urban challenge of we physically need more homes. Yeah.
we need places for people to live. I
Yeah.
remember hearing about places like like Silicon Valley that uh, so like a corporate headquarters that's out there. I can't name any off the top of my head, but so you have a corporate headquarters there. Well, you need people to come in and you need custodial
Clean,
staff.
serve the food, right? Do the massage.
Exactly. You need these
Yeah,
support staff, and there's nowhere anywhere near there that they can afford to live. Because I
exactly.
mean, like even a doghouse in that area is $1 million, and so they end up coming up with these solutions where they bus people in and pay them for the time on the bus, and in some cases. Uh, okay, so if we're thinking about, we got this whole set of problems, um, so I guess who is working on solution? Like obviously there are probably different perspectives on how to change these things, but are there like places to go and learn more about projects that people are working on, or initiatives or whatever you want to call them, or is this one of those that's a partisan divide where all the Democrats say we should do this and all the Republicans say we should do this, and Bernie Sanders was talking about the percent of the percent of the percent. Like, is there is there a
This one
partisan
is
thing on this?
actually it's gotten to the point that there is surprisingly some bipartisanship. One of the few bills in Congress right now that's bipartisan is the Housing for the 21st Century America Act. I think I've got the name correct, which is bipartisan. It tries to address some of these problems. People will argue it doesn't go far enough, but it's a first step, I would argue back to them. There's something called the abundance movement, which is a bit of a marriage between more centrist Democrats and Republicans. They're big on reforming zoning. You may have heard of the NIMBY, not in my backyard. These people who would show up at the zoning board meetings and say, I don't want more townhomes or, God forbid, condos in my area. Well, now there's a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard movement that's happening not just across the country but around the world. So there was some big changes that happened in New Zealand, for instance. Auckland, basically, New Zealand is a country with lots of space, but almost everyone lives and works in Auckland, and so
Hmm.
unless they do the sheep farming or the Lord of the Rings movies, and so which I love, by the way. But, so Auckland did this whole, it's called upzoning movement, where they, rezone basically all the land within a couple of miles, okay, kilometers of Auckland to, to allow for more dense housing. And you're starting to see that there was a huge debate in the DC area in Arlington recently, very fancy $1 million homes community now,
Okay, yeah.
and they wanted to allow builders to come in and take one of these 1 acre lots and be able to build up to eight homes on the lot. And
Hmm.
that huge debate, electric debate over this, ultimately they compromised and said, I think you could build up to four. It's either four or six. But you're starting to see these play out across the country. Some states have actually passed laws that preempt the local laws that say that, you need to allow at least basically townhome style density um, in major metro areas. And so you're starting to see some pushback, particularly on the zoning side of
Okay.
things. The other ones I don't see as much on, but it gives me some hope. And honestly, where we grew up is a good example of an area. The Harrisburg area is part of the townhome surge. There's
Hmm.
been a huge townhome building, and one of the fun things about Harrisburg area is there's a builder, that's done this really unique project where they've been building these communities. It's a mix of townhomes and single family homes.
Okay.
So they're trying to cater to the different desires that you were outlining earlier. There's demand. Some people want the yard, some people don't. And then they also build more of a town square. So there's like a strip
Oh,
of shopping in the middle that people can walk to that
okay.
has, restaurant, a couple of restaurants, a bar, a coffee shop,
And this
a
isn't super new. This is like planned communities have been like I'm
yeah,
thinking
so it's like everything
Columbia,
old is new again, but there's been
Columbia,
huge
Maryland.
demand for it,
Right.
huge
Yeah.
demand. People want to be able to walk to things, and so it's sort of this perfect mix of going back to, how rural England used to be with a little bit of a town, town pub, town center, a
Yeah.
little bit of a community green where the kids can play if you're in a townhome and don't have such a large yard. And people, they love it.
Yeah.
These they have sold really well, their values hold well, and now other builders are replicating this, and it's
And you have to, but this comes back to the finance issue, right? You can't build that if you're a mom and pop operation with, again, like a business manager who does your HR, accounting, finance, all that. And then, yeah, like a CEO or whatever, and maybe a dozen employees. You can't do that with you need a big company with a lot of financial, finance kind of behind you. So yeah, that's interesting though. Like, uh, I'm thinking about so yeah, like the plan. Well, I'll have to. I'm heading home this afternoon, so I'll have to go check it out when I'm visiting with my parents. So, yeah, I like this. So you mentioned a few things, the YIMBY and the abundance. Are there? I mean, and I can put it in the show description later if you don't have names in mind at the moment. But I heard about abundance, and I
yeah.
was that an was that what's his name? The guy
Yeah,
that
Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson
that's
wrote
it.
this book, but, a lot of
Okay.
this had been building for a while, and, a lot of people have signed on. They may not love everything in that book, but on the house, particularly this fight against the zoning, and that's where you see this marriage. Republicans are kinda like, "Why do we have all these rules?"
Yeah.
And then you also have Democrats who say, we need more housing for real people. And so it's this
Right.
kind of a funny marriage where you have people on both sides of the aisle who are like, this is ridiculous. We got to
Yeah.
fix, just like you said, the light switch. It's time to use some sanity back in the
Yeah.
process.
What if
Um,
I wanted to get involved in zoning? Like, is that an elected thing, or I'm guessing that's probably jurisdiction by jurisdiction, isn't it?
yeah.
Whether you okay. So if someone wanted to get involved in zoning or planning and that kind of thing, they would like look into your local regulations, I guess. But that could be a way that a person listening to this who maybe has a deep connection to where they live and wants to make a difference, you could get onto one of these committees or boards, or whether I don't know if it's even necessarily running, but maybe it's an appointed thing or something like that too. So yeah, for listeners, viewers that are thinking about this and saying, yeah, we could change these things. We could flip the fix everything easily switch. Maybe I'll use that as the episode art for this episode. But
Or you don't even have to get on the board. I mean, I'll give you an example. I live in a condo now. I have lived in a
mhm,
townhome, a single family home, and now a condo. So I feel like and apartments. I even lived in my parents' not basement, but I lived in their
mhm.
house. I was one of those early,
I
adults
did
who
that too.
failed to launch.
Many
Um,
such cases. Yep.
Yes, at least for a while. So, I've rented a room from somebody in their house. I mean, I feel like
Hmm.
I've lived the whole gamut, of housing over the years. But yeah, where I live currently in the DC suburbs, they were trying to do more high density next to me. And there was a big debate, how many homes is too many homes? And,
Yeah.
they wanted to put up 2 more towers, and it was hard, like, as someone who knows we need this, and, but I even in my head, I was like, "Well, maybe they should just do 1, 2 is a lot." I could see
Well,
in my
because you're
own
thinking it's going
mind
to mess with your life, right? Where are they
exactly,
going
the
to park all those
traffic,
cars?
the
That's going to
building,
make traffic
yes,
a nightmare, right? And
exactly.
that's I think as much as we get into this utopian thinking about like, well, if we just change these zoning rules and the legal system and we get the financing in place, if we do these things and we build these, it's not gonna like it's still gonna disrupt things to a certain extent, and I think that's where I try to give some grace to those that kind of want to put the brakes on things, because yeah, I got a nice little life right here, my neighborhood is single family homes, and nobody has a huge yard, but nobody has a tiny yard. It's like quarter acre. I can mow it, in a couple of hours, or maybe an hour. I can mow it, like quickly, but I've got a yard. I've got a little shed out back that is currently needs cleaned very badly. But and but at the same time, I guess, I do think about like just down the road, like, I don't know, quarter mile from here, we do have high rise housing. Now they're apartments. I don't think they're condos, but and I definitely do have moments where I think, man, if those high rises weren't there, this would be really like, this would be nicer to my commute to work would be a lot nicer, or like that when, unfortunately, when there are like crime reports, that I see, a lot of the time it's over in those high rises, and so I try to, I think it's important to have some understanding, some empathy for those that want to apply the brakes to housing development, even though we know for sure that millennials would, like, they need to be able to buy a house because they want to start a family, they want to have their forever home, or at least their starter home, and so yeah. Anyway, okay, so we do have these potential solutions, and we want to afford grace to those who oppose them, but also let's be open minded, as you said, maybe one high rise instead of two.
Yes. And let me just finish by saying I think what's really shifting mindsets is the migration to the South. The
Mm,
young people who have moved to Texas, the Carolinas, Florida, among other places, Arizona. And people are saying, "Well, why is that?" And you could joke about the weather and surfing, or people love rodeos and wearing certain kind of hats, but really, it's because those places built more housing in the recent years. That they have a
yeah,
little bit less zoning.
well,
They're
that's what I was going to
meeting.
say. I've heard Houston
Yeah,
notoriously has
Houston,
much more
notorious. Yes.
permissive. Yeah,
But I think that's what's really starting to wake up and shake up a lot of these traditional East and West Coast communities that,
yeah,
okay, all these issues we've been talking about are still on the table, but we are literally losing young talent that's fleeing because of this problem.
right,
And what can we do? What light switches can we flip, or we're really going to be behind in 10 to 15 years. And so that's where I think is forcing the conversation, and is showing that if you're willing to, you don't have to be totally Houston, but if you're willing to be a little bit more flexible, you can find
right. Right.
the kind.
There's a middle ground here, because I guess the flip side of a Houston model is and this is all, probably is, I'm years out of date on this, but I remember when Hurricane Harvey hit
Yeah.
Houston, there was a lot of talk of, well, they overdeveloped too quickly and they didn't include floodplains, and they blacktopped everything, and it gave the water nowhere to go. So like, yeah, and I'll admit I am not a stormwater expert
Yeah.
in any by any stretch of the imagination. So, but yeah, yeah, I think maybe this is, using that as a model, using that much more broader, more permissive zoning regulation stuff as a, not as a model, but as a uh, uh, as essentially data. We want to use the data, right? Use that to inform choices in places, yeah, like DC and New York and San Francisco and stuff. Yeah,
There
that's
is
really,
definitely, if you build it, they will come. If you build
yeah,
it, yeah, people will come. And so I think
yeah,
that's a real wake up call. And you see this new generation of mayors, Republican and Democrat, and county officials who are
hmm,
waking up to that reality.
yeah,
And frankly, what's really churns a lot of people's minds is just what you were saying. Where are our firefighters and police going to live? You know,
yeah,
well, we can all
yeah,
agree we would like to have those folks not
yeah. Well,
commuting
yeah,
on the bus an hour away. And so,
yeah.
that's
Although,
where you start to see the conversation change when you think about it through that lens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and there are all these pieces of connective tissue that I am very fortunate to see in sort of the organism of a municipal government or local government. The pieces that you just don't think about until you kind of see them from a different perspective. But yeah, police, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, stuff like that. But I always sing the praises of our public works people,
Yes.
the people that pave the roads and keep the water running and stuff like that. And frankly, police and firefighters, if they're full-time firefighters, a lot of time the compensation for police and fire is actually, I mean, they can generally afford to live in the area. Where I think people struggle more are the people that keep the water running and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's a good
Their
point.
pay is not nearly as high. You know,
Alright. Who's got
and
the
I will
data
say,
on this one?
yeah,
So
right,
I
yeah.
I hear you.
Well, you can have our data too. It's all publicly listed. But I will say, and this is not to go too far afield, but I think it's an encouraging thing to see that police pay was used to be very like when we were in high school that it was kind of a controversy that local police were just very very low compensated, and I think that's gotten a lot better as far as I can tell, and it's important because it's an important job, but also I certainly don't want our police officers struggling to make ends meet because they might be tempted by other incentives,
Speaking of
in that
incentives, the last
situation.
point that I would make, I mean, there's a lot of other things that could go into housing reform. Obviously, we
Sure.
focused on a few, but one of the things that I've come around on is some Republicans have really been pushing the idea of um, lifting the capital gains tax exemption to help the baby boomers get out of these big homes that they've owned that they
Okay.
no longer need now that their kids are grown and da da da. And so right now in America, a
Okay.
married couple can exempt up to $500,000, which is a lot in gains. But obviously we were talking about how much homes have gone up, and so even my
Well,
parents who bought another home in Pennsylvania, for about 500,000 back in the early 90s, now it's worth $1 million. And it's
right.
not,
Yeah.
it's not they bought $1 million home, but the market has shifted so much. And um, so anyway, I've come around a little bit more. I think there's a way you could do it that doesn't just reward Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. You could lift that cap to 750 or $1 million, and you could say you have to have lived in the home as your primary residence for 10 years or 20 years. Basically really target baby boomers who live on the coast or live in areas like Miami, where their home they bought in the 90s or 80s is now worth way more, and say, okay, how do we really help those people to move on? You know,
We want to
so
incentivize them
yeah,
to make
through
the
the tax.
decision they kind of already want to make, but are
Yes,
maybe
right.
hesitant because of the tax consequences of
Right,
doing so.
right. Either
Okay.
the tax or, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but that's certainly one factor that would be pretty easy to remove and to do in a way that isn't just a tax giveaway to millionaires and more. So, there's things like that that I think there could be there's more openness to now. I've certainly shifted my mindset around this. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. I jotted down capital gains tax and capital gains tax exemption. I jotted those down. I don't have a good handle on capital gains tax. Like I have a very rudiment. I know it has to do with selling things, uh, which would be the capital and the gain. But I think that might be a topic. I don't know. At the very
I
least,
think
I'm
it's
going to
time.
look into it. I don't know if we want to dig into it on the show, but anyway. Uh, well, okay. So I feel like I have a much better handle on this. Kind of how things got this way, but that there are ways out. It's going to take sort of a multifaceted approach. Your three things of looking at zoning, maybe some relaxing of zoning regulations, maybe not even not universally, but maybe well, literally in a zone, have a different zoning in that zone, and financing some way to finance. And this is where I started thinking about crowdsourcing and things like that. So maybe someday, but and also the legal system, sort of the torts, the liability stuff for building a high rise. So okay, I like that they're I like when there's sort of concrete things to think about instead of just being mad at the problem.
Yeah.
Now I can be
Yeah.
mad at the parts of the problem, I guess. But anyway, well, thank you very much for your expertise and knowledge about this. And yeah, we'll talk about our next topic. But I've got, I don't know. We talked. I'm still crypto is still itching my brain. So if people want to sound off in comments, if they want to hear about stable coin, which I think it might have something to do with horses. Stable. Sorry, terrible joke. But if you have a topic that you're interested in us covering next, please feel free to sound off in the comments or email me or whatever. So thank you very much, Heather. Have a great week, everybody.